So in this video, we are going to talk about FortiGate firewall and how you can configure FortiGate firewall with a trunk link and you got a trunk with VLAN 10 and a VLAN 20. VLAN 10 is connected to VOS 1 with this address, and VLAN 20 is connected to VOS 2 with this address. So in VMware workstation or player that I have, I'm choosing the FortiGate. Let's just look at VOS 1. So VOS 1 is connected to VLAN 10, but it's connected to the same port on FortiGate, so it has to be the same wire. So the same wire is N1. N1 is our wire or segment on VOS 1, and then we have VOS 2 on the same wire, N1. So this N1 in VOS 1 and VOS 2 is going to this port on FortiGate that is connected on N1. My first port on VOS on the FortiGate is a management port. The second one is port 1 on N1. This is where VOS 1 and VOS 2 are connected. And the third one is N3 connected to VOS 3. Okay. Again, the management port, as soon as you download the VMware version of FortiGate, you need to connect the first port to VMnet 1, which is, you can see by IP config that it's going to have an address 192.168, what have you. Okay. So once you got this figured out and connected, you got these connections in the virtual setup. This is all VMware player workstation, sorry. So FortiGate is connected to port 1, which is VMnet 1 connected to my laptop interface. This is how I'm going to be doing the browser and SSH into it. Port 2 connected as a trunk, VLAN 10, VLAN 20, VLAN 10 going to V1, VLAN 20 going to V2 with these addresses. Now, for the VOS to be connected as a trunk, you have to make sure that you put in Ethernet 0.10 as a VIF virtual interface, and the configuration for that is going to look like this. Show interfaces, and you can see that it's got an Ethernet 0.10 edit interface E. Well, I'll just show you the command: set interface Ethernet 0 VIF 10 address, and there it is. Okay, so you got to configure it with the VIF for it to be able to do the trunking with FortiGate. And then once you have FortiGate configured, you have to configure VLAN 10 on Fortigate, and VLAN 20, and then on VLAN 10 you need to include port 2, and on VLAN 20 you need to include port 2, and provide the addresses on Fortigate. These are 250, 250 on the subnet. Let's look at this configuration. So you go to network interfaces and you'll see that port 2 has a plus sign. You expand that VLAN 10 and you will see that you can add an interface with VLAN 10. You need to put in VLAN ID, LAN, and put an IP address here, and that's about it. All right, same thing with VLAN 20. Put it in port 2. This is the port in VLAN 10 and 20, so that's how you trunk in Fortigate. It's very, different. You have to include it in the VLAN interface that this is the ports, and that's how it automatically becomes a trunk interface. Once port 2 is configured as trunk, where it's not explicitly configured, again, you have to go into the VLAN interface, configure the IPs. You just have to include the interface to make it a trunk. Once that becomes a trunk, you'll see that port 2 has no address. It's got sub interfaces 10 and 20, and that's exactly how VOS 1 and VOS 2 are configured. On a tag, on a trunk tag, you're tagging these. So they are tagging their interface with 20, and this guy is tagging it with 10. VLAN 10 tag, VLAN 20 tag comes to the Fortigate with on port 2 with 10 and 20, and there you go. You have these configured. Verify them. So you can ping the firewall. Okay, so now you have your firewall to the LAN side connectivity up. Okay. Going back to our diagram, this portion is completed. On the Fortigate part, we have the management through which we have the browser on, and it'll get a DHCP address on that, and that's the address that you will pull, 71.133. Port 3 is the WAN facing or the internet facing port for Fortigate, and it's going to do Ebgp. It's going to do Ebgp with VOS 3. It has a loopback address configured with 200. This segment is 10.1.1/24. He is .3 and he .1. Sorry. He is .1 and he is .3 on E0. No VLAN tags configured here, right? Just a plain physical interface. Ebgp is pretty straightforward on the VOS part. I've got a lot of videos on that, but I'll show you again. Here is the VOS 3 configure set protocol BGP, AS number is 3. I've already configured that. You configure neighbor as 10.1.1. Remote AS is going to be 1 for the Fortigate. And then you press enter. And then you say set protocol BGP at address, one address family, IPv4 unicast network, and then you advertise the network, which is your loopback address. Okay. So if I do show, you can see that I have this configured here with a network 200.11/32, neighboring with this guy, and so Fortigate will learn through Ebgp this loopback address, and what we will do is we will have source NATs for V1 and V2 reaching this address, and we will have a destination NAT through WIP. So this is your inside server that the clients would like to access. So I'm mapping a public IP address to this inside address through a VIP. So when you do try to access the server, V2 server, you basically going to use this destination address and hit this destination address, and you would get mapped to this one. So let's look at the BGP configuration, then look at the VIP configuration. So you got the source NATs, and here's the destination NATs through VIP. And how do we advertise the VIP? This is going to be advertising BGP through static route, static redistributed into BGP. Okay, so now let's look at Fortigate with first source NATs. That's all your firewall policies. So you got your ports configured. Your port 2, port 3 looks like this. Simple. Look in the configuration. It's got the IP addresses, physical addresses, enable the ping for it. That's about it. Now you go to the policies, firewall policies. So your source NAT is V1, since V1 and V2 are in 2 different zones. So I created 2 different zones. If you go to network interfaces, you see that I have 3 zones. One is for VOS1, VOS2, and third one is the internet, right? 3 zones. So by default, V1, V2 would not be able to talk unless you create policies, which I have done. You go to policies, you go to firewall policies, and then you look at the source NAT. So I've got these V1 to V2 configuration, V1 to V2 policies to let them talk. But we'll talk about V1 to V3, which is the internet, V1 to V3 right here. And so this is your first source NAT, V1 to internet. Your incoming interface is V1, which you should be able to see right here. Your outgoing is V3 internet. These are the zones, right? So you're selecting the zones for policies, you're selecting the zones. If you don't have zones, then you can select on the interfaces, raw interfaces, but I have zones, so I'm choosing the zones. And your source address is VLAN 10 addresses. You'll select it from here, or you can create a specific address and stuff like that. It's running all the time. Your service is all and you're NATing. Okay, if you don't do the NAT, then you have to create a routing for your source address. Since we have this connected, this one is, our network is connected. I'll show you what I mean here. I'm NATing. Basically what that means is our first NAT source NAT is using this address for its outgoing. So the packet will come in with the source address of this guy. Policy would say, yeah, you got a policy, and then you're gonna NAT it. So this guy is already connected. So he doesn't need a route for this IP address, which is 10.0.11.11. In the real world, obviously, you're gonna have a public IP, one single public IP or multiple public IPs that you're gonna be advertising in the internet, and you're gonna be NATing to that. So he's going to come in, he's going to do a source NAT, use this IP address. He already knows where this IP address is, and he can reach it, all right? Same case with this. This was V1 to V3 internet. This one is V2 to V3 internet. Source NATs. Source NATs, basically you're changing the source address to your outgoing interface. Okay, so you got two source NATs configured here. And that's about it. You NAT it and you are done with this policy. That basically means now I should be able to ping my 200 address, show IP route. I have a default route there, just to make sure that I can go to my default gateway, which is the firewall. So I should be able to ping the 200 loopback, which I am, and my policy, I believe, was everything. So I should also be able to SSH. There you go. I'm in that server. Okay. So your source NAT works like this. Now let's go and take a look at all control to get out of this. Now take a look at the Ebgp part, the WIP, and how you advertise the WIP and BGP, right? So we looked at the BGP advertisement of V3. Let's look at Fortigate BGP and how it's going to advertise. So let's go and take a look at that. So you go in first, network static routes. You define a static route first and do it on a black hole. So you're black holing this route because your destination is actually the server. You're mapping it. So there's nothing on the firewall that you want this to go to. So you basically say a subnet 2020.20/0/24. You just black hole it, select black hole here, and that's about it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go to BGP and assign local AS, router ID, create a new network, a new neighbor, which is your VOS3 address. Remote address is VOS3 AS. And then after that, you always have to remember to apply. You're going to go and you're going to redistribute that static that you created, static route. Once you do this and apply, what you're going to see is your VOS3 will see 20. So here's how it sees 20 through BGP. Now if I try to hit V20, I don't get anything because my policy only says SSH. I'm into my VOS2, right? So once you have the routing configured, you would go into the network, and you would configure a VIP policy. Virtual IP under firewall policy. And that's basically what's saying is that whatever name you want to give, static NAT, anything coming with this destination address map to my server, which is my VOS1. That's it. Once you do that, you create a policy. You need to do a VIP, and then you need to create a policy. My policy name is DNAT. And it says that anything coming on this interface, VOS3 internet interface, which is a zone, outgoing interface would be V2, right? And if the destination address is DNAT VIP, so once you create the VIP, it should show up in your destination. There it is. Okay. So you choose your DNAT VIP, schedule it, and my policy is only SSH, and I'm doing NAT. So that's your destination NAT, right? It doesn't spell out source NAT, destination NAT. It just says NAT. But what you're doing is you're doing destination NAT. You're basically changing your destination address from 2020 to your server address 10/2021. Okay. Once you do that, that's about it. Make sure your BGP is good before you do this. Go to BGP. You look at your neighbors. You will see your neighbors, and you look at your routing, and you see 200 coming in through BGP, and you have a static for 20 that you're redistributing into BGP. Once that is done, you got this thing configured, running for source NAT and destination NAT through the WIP. That's how you would configure Fortigate. I've got a video on SD-WAN on Fortigate already, but with the trunking and source NATs and destination NATs, this should help you get Fortigate firewall going. Hope this helps.